Good morning, folks, and welcome to episode 11 of the Fintech Insider Breakfast Show, a show from the folks from 11FS, bringing you the breaking news around fintech and banking landscape every morning at what time is it, Chad? The time difference has kind of messed me up this morning. 8:30 GMT. The idea is that seeing as we're all going to be cooped up this morning and every morning for the next couple of months, then we thought we would try and give you something to start your day a little bit brighter and keep you entertained and informed. The show is going to be a bit of a mix between the 11FS family and a bunch of friends from 11FS as well. So we've been talking to various different people from around the globe, but this week we have somebody a little bit closer to shore. So this is Chad West, who is the Director of Marketing and Comms at Revolut. How's it going, Chad?
Good.
Sorry to get you up a bit early. Yeah, I mean,
I'm a late riser.
Well, I mean, for anybody who wasn't on it just before, Chad was saying like it takes a lot less time for my haircut to be done in the morning than his, right? So, well done for getting up a little bit earlier and joining us. I mean, how's it going, Chad? Because obviously, we are in complete lockdown now. Is the world still turning where you are?
Yeah, still turning. I think like most companies, Revolut's now shifted completely to working from home. I think we touched on this another conversation, but I think for a lot of companies that might be a very new concept. This might be a thing that people are maybe struggling to adjust with. But I think for Revolut and probably like most other tech companies and startups, we've all, as a cloud-based digital company, we've always been able to accommodate this. So we've never had everyone doing it from home at the same time, and it's always funny to see people's kids and dogs running in during Zoom meetings. But yeah, just keeping the wheel running, business as usual.
It's amazing to see how companies can do this, isn't it? I mean, particularly in the fintech space, I think everybody's pretty much built for this type of work, right? It's particularly very heavily engineering companies, like engineers like isolation at the best of times. It's usually just headphones rather than 2 hours away from the office. But I mean, have you guys seen productivity at the same sort of level in terms of people working, or is it dipped a little bit?
No, it's still relatively consistent. I think what's surprising is, including myself in this, a lot of people don't enjoy working from home. I'm someone who typically hasn't been a fan of it. I like to go in the office and be busy. And I think for a lot of people, they've realized just how much more efficient they can be working from home with less distraction. Arguably, we're in more challenging times, so people are more determined than ever to do better at what they're doing and to accelerate it. So no, product levels still very much consistent with sort of typical Revolut, but as I say to a lot of people, I think we're still at the early stages of this. When you read online, they're still sort of hinting at the idea that this could be another few months in the making of working remotely. So I think for now, it's
for a
still
lot of
short
people,
term,
they realize
but I think going forward, it'll be perhaps a little bit more challenging as companies have to adapt to this on a more long-term scale. I think I have lost volume. Yeah, I can hear you. It's on his side. Yeah. I'm going to be David Brear for 2 minutes and just apologise. It looks like we have lost David's sound, but I am assured that he's coming back any minute now.
Hey folks, I think we're probably back right now. That was, I think, probably the internet over in Norwich. So apologies for that in terms of the impact to anybody's viewing pleasure. Chad, I mean, I was saying before I got sort of cut off and I caught. I mean, I could hear everything you were saying. So clearly, hopefully, you could hear everything I was saying. But I mean, talk us through some of the changes over the last couple of weeks because I mean, I bumped into you at the British Banking Awards a couple of weeks ago, and since then, you guys have announced a CEO of an Australia. You've launched in the US. Amazing amount of things happening. So maybe you start with the US. That must have been something that's been in the works for quite some time.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think it's about 2.5 years in total
Wow.
since we've been working in the US. So it's proven to be a bit of a challenge, but obviously a huge milestone for us as a business. I think people probably know by now that Revolut's vision is to build a global financial app, right? We want to connect as many of your financial services to one app as possible, and a big chunk of that is expanding globally. And I think one of the most exciting innovations that we've produced from the US launch, aside from the obvious, is the idea of truly tearing down financial borders. We've been sort of plugging it a lot on the Revolut side over the last couple of weeks, but if you have Revolut in the UK or France or Germany, one of our home markets in Europe, and you know someone who has Revolut in the US or Singapore or Australia, you can send money to each other instantly and for free, just like a peer-to-peer payment cross-border. You can cross the currencies. So for me, I think that's rare. That's not been done before. There's a huge sort of money transfer industry that currently is taking 2 to 3 days to send people's money cross border. It's charging them fees and markups. So to actually make that instantaneous and connect people financially across the world has been great. But it was stressful times. I think we've got about 50 people in our New York office. I think everyone's a little bit nervous, like, do we launch or do we hold off? Is this the right time to do it? But we all agreed that, now more than ever, people probably need access to financial services that can give them these flexibilities, that can offer them a way to easily budget and track their money, that can let them send money to friends and family abroad. So that was our logic in saying, actually, let's push forward for this. But no, despite everything, some great media pickup. We signed up tens of thousands on the day of launch, which was phenomenal. The team were really impressed. And sort of now in traditional Revolut fashion, it's about let's sort of get churning out products that were really sort of have a strong product market fit in the US, because as we know, two very different markets, the Europe and the US.
Yeah, there's very different nuances there, isn't there? But the the sort of unbanked or near banked, which something with a couple of minute account opening process is really going to benefit, isn't it? But I mean, we've got lots and lots of people sort of tuning in, Chad, this morning. So hey, Deval from the mayor's office. Hey, Trevor Hunt, how's it going? Dharmesh Mistry every morning. Nice to see you again. Good question on the comments from Lucy Evans. So Chad, how are Revolut communicating with customers at this time? I guess for you guys as a purebred digital company, like digital communication seems like quite an easy thing to do, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we haven't. One thing I'm a big believer in is during a crisis is not over communicating. I think there's often a habit for companies to plow out as many messages as they can, to be thinking left, right, and center about what incentives they can do. And I actually think from a customer experience perspective, that can be quite confusing, and it can equally be quite worrying. So I think for us, step one was very much sending communication out to our customers just to give them assurance that it's business as usual. Because we now have over 10 million customers, and it's easy to say, well, everyone knows that Revolut's a cloud-based digital company, but in reality, they don't. I'm sure there's millions of our customers who are maybe not sure how we work as a business. So step one for me was just giving assurance that, look, we can accommodate working from home. Our customer support is online as always. Our engineers and product teams are online as always. Nothing about your Revolut experience is going to change. And I think that should be a key for any sort of company, particularly in financial services. And, we addressed this from our CEO, of course, and Nick was very involved. And I think that's important, that it doesn't just come as a generic, another sort of email that lands in your inbox. This is sort of an open letter from Nick to you as a customer. So we covered that. And then, like many companies, we were actually wondering, what can we actually do? Now, I get a little bit frustrated. Sometimes I find brands, I don't want to say take advantage of these situations, because that might be a little bit too harsh, but they often jump on a bandwagon. We see it with things like Pride each year. Companies change their logos, and you'll see a lot of companies now trying to do things, and there'll be people out there who may rightfully question, is it sincere? Are you doing this because you truly care, or is this a marketing opportunity for you? I think you'll probably know that about a year ago now, we launched our donations feature. Yep. And this was really important. In fact, I remember pitching it 2 years ago to Nick personally, and him being like, okay, it's great, but not a priority right now. But we got it over the line. We've signed up some amazing charities. I mean, we've raised over £1 million in total for people like WWF, ILGA Europe, and others. And then just last week, we onboarded the Trussell Trust, which obviously accommodates over 14 million people living in poverty in the UK. So it's a connection of food banks that's giving people emergency aid in this time of need. And we're able to instantly onboard them onto our platform, allow our 10 plus million customers to donate to them seamlessly. Revolut waives any fees. So literally what the customer donates is exactly what the client gets. So this was an example of us sort of a continuation of the good sort of tech for good work that we've been doing over the last 12 months, but obviously.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man, we're having no luck today, are we? I think I mean week 3, and if the internet goes down, and working remotely is definitely not going to be the way in which this can work. I mean, as you say, Chad, there's a huge amount that you guys have been doing in the space, and it is interesting to see when people are sort of jumping on that bandwagon to a certain degree, because I mean, there's definitely some. I mean, I seem to have got an email from everybody I've ever done anything with ever, any SaaS system I seem to have signed up to for the last 10 years seems to have sent me a message saying they deeply care about me. So, I mean, it is strange that people are sort of using that as an opportunity, which is a bit sad. But I mean, things like this where, like, say you've got, did you say 10 million customers now? being in a situation where you've got that larger community, that community can do a huge amount of positivity when there's a need, can't it?
Yeah, massively. I mean, we saw a huge uptake in day one. I think what's amazing for me is to see is that when you look at a lot of fintech companies that we maybe talk the most about, a lot of them are UK only, right? And the UK, Britain as a whole has a pretty sort of similar culture as a people. If you look at Revolut, we're operating in, with over 1 million customers in some markets, ranging from France and Poland, Spain, Italy. These are all very different cultures, very different groups of people. But I think what was amazing for me was to see how that everyone unified on the platform. There was no talk about borders or geographies or territories. It was just customers coming together, donating their spare change, doing what they can to help one another out. And I think, we talk about scale at the minute, but, in reality, 10 million customers is not a huge amount. We've still got a long way to go. But yeah, fundamentally, I think it's always great to see that people can come together at a time of need, and that's been the case across Europe, not just amongst our customers in the UK.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a thousand different questions we could sort of take this in, but I think, I mean, the thing I always sort of see with Revolut, you guys get quite a hard time. Is it fair to say? I'm gonna go ahead, Chad, because
Yeah.
I probably get as much of a hard time as you do personally. But you guys get quite a hard time online. I think particularly there's always sort of points around culture and motivation and change and everything that goes on. I mean, it's worth us probably talking about that because I mean I've said very very frequently and I've sort of said this publicly a bunch of times before is like I say a lot of the stuff that you guys have said in the past, whether it's the get shit done or whether it's the kind of approach to really ensuring that the bar is kept high. I mean, what do you think? Sort of, why do you think it became fashionable during a period to kind of have a bit of a pop at you guys? Because I mean, we did a roundtable for FinTech Insider with journalists the other day, and I asked specifically the question. It was like, is FinTech's just got so big that now it's like everybody loves the underdog, but when they've got 10 million customers, everybody likes to take a pop at them. I mean, what do you think to that? Because it's I think a lot of it is quite unfair.
Yeah, sadly, it is, and Revolut's not the only one. We've seen it with much larger tech companies, and we'll continue to see it go on. I think, for us, we definitely haven't always got things right, and I think we're very open to that. I think one of the reasons I love Revolut is that it's a company that's open to failing, right? It's the case of, not in terms of a business, but very much in terms of individuals. It's like, try your best, try new things, give it a go. If it doesn't work out, no problem. Let's find out why and fix it. But I think, in saying that, from a cultural perspective, I think a lot of the comments we get were from a company that we were 2-3 years ago now, when we were 50 people, still learning. Most of the company, including the founders, had never managed people before, had never built a company. This was a whole new experience and a very stressful one. So I think there was understanding that we wouldn't get everything right. But I think now that we've scaled to more than 2,500 employees, and certainly over 2 years in a startup, a lot of people say to me, "Oh yeah, but 2 years isn't a long time," but they've never worked in a startup, right? Where 2 years is the equivalent to like 5, 6, 7, 8 in the corporate world. So I think we've learned a lot from that. We've grown incredibly as a company in terms of the people that we've hired. We've adopted processes, built large teams, and really tried to sort of demonstrate scale, which is never an easy thing. But I think at the same time, there may be some brands, particularly in UK tech, who really push their culture on a wider sector. They really talk about being sort of the really lovey-dovey company, and that's great. And a lot of people question how sincere that is, me included, because even before Revolut, I'd worked in startups before. I know the game. So I think it did become fashionable because equally Revolut was a very outspoken brand. It was a company that wasn't afraid to say what was on its mind. It was a company that wasn't afraid to venture into unknown territories that would bring some skepticism. So we were open to the fact that some would come our way, and equally didn't always make life easy for ourselves with some of the things we did. But for me, that's just the beauty of learning, of growing as a business. I think it's testament to the fact that back then we were 1 million customers, or 1.5 million, I think, and today we're 10 million. We were 50 employees, we're now 2,500. So for me, it's I think we have to come to a reality that we don't all need to follow this Google culture. of bean bags and ping pong tables and putting signs on the toilet doors. I think that's fine if that suits you, but I think we need to actually value. I think one of the reasons startups in tech are so great is because they have such diverse cultures. They operate in such different ways, and that allows them to truly get to where they are, to be who they want to be. And of course, so long as people don't cross the line, and rightfully so, when you do cross the line, you should be, you should get a bit of a slap, as many brands do. But I think for me, it's what's more annoying is like it just doesn't go away. It's kind of like that bad smell in the room that just sort of lingers. I think people have lost an understanding of how you operate and how you act as a very small startup, and then where you are 2 to 3 years later. So we've got thick skin. We've always been happy with it, to sort of accommodate it and just demonstrate through the great products that we build, the customers that we serve, that Revolut's doing tremendous things. So. And then, yeah, like you say, I think I've always been a fan of your Twitter, right? And the outspokenness, people challenging the status quo. I think that's something that should be encouraged. I mean, I've learned more from people I disagree with than people I agree with, and I think that should apply equally in a business sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big thing there about. I mean, to your point, fintech 3-4 years ago was in its infancy, but actually the brands massively outweighed the impact at that scale, right? Like I say, when you guys were 50 employees, you still had a global brand, right? So it's amazing to start seeing actually the reality of the scale of the companies that are actually out there in terms of, like say you guys are now 10 million customers and thousands of employees. Then in reality, the brand is now catching up with the scale and the size of the company, which is an amazing thing. I mean, the other thing I'd sort of say on that as well is that the reality of a startup culture, a startup culture is in the first few years, the company is vying for survival. So the setup that's there, the requirements that are there to really deliver against the things that you need to do, else you run out of money because your investors are pushing you to do the things that you need to. I think so many people comment on things that they don't really understand in that side, which is quite a scary thing, because to your point, it's very difficult to shake that off regardless of thousands of other positive things that are kind of happening to a certain degree. I mean, what else are you guys up to then? Because I mean, Australia looks like it's going to be pretty big for you guys as well. I mean, this aspiration of like creating a truly sort of global bank, sounded kind of crazy maybe 3-4 years ago, but you guys are bloody doing it, right?
Yeah, it's sort of just staying true to our business model of what we wanted to do. And again, I think one thing, fintech in its infancy, right? We were all told that things weren't possible, that you couldn't do X, Y, and Z. I think what's positive now is that slowly evaporating, and people are now sitting back and being like, well, do you know what? It probably is possible now. So Nick did a great presentation just a few weeks ago before the shutdown, where he really sold the vision of the company to what we were actually trying to build, which is the equivalent of a financial super app. We want to make sure that Revolut is the app, the single app that you use for your banking, for your travel and FX, for your wealth management, and for your personal lending, everything that comes into one single app. I'm always a big believer that people don't want 3-4 apps in their phone. They don't want one for their crypto, one for their trading, one for their banking. If they can have it all within an app where they love the UX, they love the UI, they get the best possible rates, that's the way that fintech should be going, in my opinion, as opposed to trying to do one thing and do it very well, which I think can become very dated very quickly. But yeah, obviously a part of our mission, in addition to building that product diversification, is expanding into different geographies and truly being a global company. So we're now live in Singapore, which has been phenomenally successful. We're now sort of at the final stage of our beta in Australia, which has been great. We're now building up the full stack team there in Melbourne. We've now got, as I say, over 50 people based in New York. And of course, we have an exceptional expansion team who are constantly looking at the data and doing their research on what would be a sensible decision next in terms of where Revolut goes. So yeah, the logic is pretty much there. We obviously already have a banking license in Europe. So the idea now is that when we go into new territories, the longer term goal is that we secure banking licenses and become a truly global bank. So yeah.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, like you guys are you is there a map on the wall in the office? You're just coloring it in slowly, or is it there's got to be I guess some logic to the direction here. Obviously, Singapore is highly digitally savvy. New York as well from a base. There's actually some real good players that are already there, but maybe not scaling. And so I mean, and it feels like you guys are going to get to everywhere at some point, right? Is that literally the when Nick stands up and says, I want to get to all of these places? Is it just everywhere? Is it like a truly global bank?
No, I think obviously the end goal is, you'd love to be globally operating, right? I think Nick's quite sensible in establishing that there's priority. So we conduct a hell of a lot of research into a market, and we try to understand what is our product market fit in each market. So right now, for sure, you can look at these large sort of metropolitan countries like the US, Singapore, Australia. But I think there's so much more that we can do from a more strategic expansion perspective. So looking at parts of other parts of Asia and Latin America, and potentially wondering where the unbanked population is not just 10, 5, 6, 7%. It's as high as 50, 60, 70%, and seeing what banking solutions we can provide there. We do exceptional research on the local remittance market, local travel market. We look at the local competitor landscape to understand what's happening from both a traditional bank perspective, but equally from a local fintech perspective, if there is one. So it's very strategic in understanding where can we go and where can we have a true product market fit and grow pretty quickly, as opposed to thinking, here's a map, let's just go everywhere and throw our dice, and two or three of them will work, right?
Well, it seems. I mean, whatever you guys are doing, it's working. So whatever it is, keep going. You guys are hoovering up amazing amount of customers. I think you're delivering quicker than anybody else in the market, which is great. Which is why I think you're getting so much love, but also I think why you get so much hate as well. Nobody likes number one, my friend. There's a bunch of comments in the Slack in LinkedIn. So I mean, Dexter Cousins says, "Too right, guys. Days of the Feature app is absolutely gone." There is lots of kind of love for this idea around the sort of super app that's pulled in. The question actually from Emily Spavin, who is the UK editor of LinkedIn. So this one, take this one seriously. How has the US launch gone? It must be very strange times to launch anything anywhere right now. Have you had to sort of dial back some of the marketing, obviously in these times?
Yeah, a big fan of Dexter and Emily. So hi to them both. No, I don't think so. I think our goal was never to go into the US and spend, six-figure sums on marketing and just go all over the metro stations, because ultimately, while that may be great from a brand's perspective, potentially, it doesn't really result in acquisition. So for me, it's kind of like pissing money up the wall. So I think we've tried to go in and really focus on our USP. I mean, we already had about 100,000 people on the waiting list signed up. We engaged incredibly with these customers in order to understand what were the features they were using, why, if they were to recommend it to a friend, why. So the launch went incredibly well. I was quite surprised because, typically we do quite a good job on the media scene, getting a lot of coverage when Revolut does something, but it proved a lot more tricky. I mean, I was in New York right before the lockdown. I think it was about 4 or 5 days before meeting all of the tier one media over there. And it was incredible how they were all just like, any other day, Chad, I'd cover this, but we need to focus on this. But despite that, we still had great conversations with TechCrunch, Verge, and others. We were able to really get the message out there. We communicated with our existing customers and waiting list customers in order for them to spread the word of Revolut. And then I think and as a result, we saw tens of thousands of signups on the first day of launch alone. And I think one thing that was quite key that we did was we really tapped into our UK and European customers to get their referrals for people they know in the US. We really plugged this idea that, if you know someone, if you're working for Google in London and you have colleagues in Google in San Francisco, you can now send each other money instantly and for free, like Venmo, and that message really started to resonate where people who maybe have, they maybe have a mortgage in the US, they have kids studying at schools abroad. This is now a bit of a lifesaver for these people. So I think it was great. It's still early days. I think we've still got a lot of work to do. We've now hired a full stack team out in New York who are preparing what the strategy looks like over the next 6 to 12 months. Obviously, going a bit back to the drawing board, given what's going on, and not really having a great deal of certainty as to how quick it'll go. But no, despite everything, incredibly successful. And what's really interesting is we have an incredible product roadmap for the US over the next few months. So when I said it's business as usual for Revolut, I wasn't kidding, right? Almost every single month we've got something new launching, and these will be very strong product market fits for the US, with a very targeted strategy of how we get them. So yeah, watch this space, but good so far.